Imagine going to school and getting barked at. Not by your teachers, but by fellow students. Well, kids from Mount Nebo Middle School in Payson, Utah walked out on Wednesday because of furries. Yes, you heard that right. Furries, people who dress up in costumes of animals, are apparently distracting other students at the school. Not only do their classmates go to school clad in animal getup, but they act like it too, licking, biting, and scratching other students.
75 students and parents from the school took part in the hours-long protest that was triggered by a petition demanding a stricter dress code per several reports. A Change.org petition titled Students for Humans at School, Not Animals, aka Furries, went live on Sunday. And it's so far garnered nearly 2,200 signatories, far exceeding the initial goal of 500. In addition to calling for a stricter dress code, it also prohibits, quote, elements of a student's appearance that draw undue attention, distract, disrupt, or otherwise interfere with the learning atmosphere at school. Nebo School District Information Officer Seth Sorensen refuted claims that there have been incidents of biting and licking, telling the Daily Mail, quote, there are 11 and 12-year-old students, and while sometimes these children may come to school with a headband that has ears, and sometimes with giant bows, and sometimes dressed as their favorite athlete, there have been no students attending school wearing masks, animal costumes, or acting like animals. Now, Amber, I was in school when people did wear those big ears. It was kind of a part of like emo fashion at the time. It wasn't explicitly like furry stuff, but it's just, oh, there's the weird cat girl who wears the cat and tail, like cat ears and tail sometimes. It wasn't like a big deal. And it wasn't explicitly like, oh, she must be a furry. That is a sexual thing. But I think now more people know what furries are. But it seems that this may have been blown out of proportion.
Yeah, maybe. I'm glad we had the same experience. It must be a public school thing because we also had the cat girl, and then we had a fox girl who wore a tail and the ears. And the cat girl would actually lick her hand and use it to like clean her face like a cat would do. Really bizarre stuff. And obviously it was sort of an attention thing. And these kids, there's a video of them after the walkout talking about some of the things that they've experienced and what the principal's response was. And they claim, I mean, this school resource officer is disputing it, but they do claim that they were allowing the kids who were dressed up like animals to actually lick them or bite other students. And when they complained to their teachers or to the principal about it, they said, oh, well, we have to be inclusive of everybody. We have to be nice to each other. So, you know, just keep that in mind when you're choosing how to respond, as opposed to disciplining the kids who were licking and biting others, which is obviously beyond bizarre. There's also an interview that the local news did of a local adult furry. And this interview is incredible. I wish we could play it. We don't have permission, but the video shows this person dressed up as like a cartoon dog or a wolf or something. And they actually say that there's a time and a place for being a furry, and school is not it, and that the school should not allow kids to basically dress up like they are or to act like they are, and that kids should keep their hobby to outside of the classroom lest it become a distraction. So, I mean, to me, it seems like the dress code that they're trying to advance seems like it would be kind of an obvious way to address this without targeting any specific student. They can just keep it to, you know, we're going to wear these specific clothes that don't distract from the learning environment. We're not going to wear animal regalia or what have you. And it seems like that would probably solve a lot of the problem. But if it is true that the principal was telling these kids that they had to sit there and take the behavior for fear of not being nice to another student, it's just a dereliction of duty, really. The whole point of having a principal is that you have an adult in the room who is able to make sure that he's fostering a good learning environment for the students there, that he's solving these disputes that often pop up between young people. They're unable to solve themselves, and he needs to really just act like the adult and say, okay, this behavior is unacceptable. We're not going to lick each other. We're not going to bite each other. And the students who are complaining are right in this instance and deserve to not have their personal boundaries violated.
Right. I think in some scenarios, forbidding kids from wearing animal costumes to school because they identify as an animal either sometimes or all the time, I think it's a good anti-bullying policy, if you will. I think in any public school, it's just a recipe to be made fun of. And I love that Seth works with kids because he says, someone wearing the cat ears. We also have kids dressing up as their favorite athletes. Are you referring to wearing a jersey? That's not
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah, that's not the same as cat ears and a tail, sir, but I love that you see it that way. That's good for kids who still have that imagination. But I do think, as someone who went to public school, that there's something good about not bullying, but the kind of social pressure you have to understand the cultural and societal norms of where you live. There's a reason why there's these kinds of sentiments about people who went to private school or were homeschooled that were sheltered to the extent of having trouble being social. There's something good about going to a public school with a lot of students and having that kind of social pressure so that you can more easily make friends and be with other people. It's an important part of your life where you learn how to interact with people. And there's something that just sets you apart as an outcast if you choose to wear something as extreme as cat ears and a tail and like lick your hand and rub it. There's something good about being in a public school where people are like, hey man, don't do that.
Yeah, no, you have an important point there because there's obviously some instances where in public school, people who are just a little bit outside of the norm do get bullied for unfair reasons and kind of have to develop that backbone to be willing to express themselves in a healthy way. But there's also people who are just being plain antisocial, engaging in behavior that is unacceptable in any society, let alone in a public school. And I think in modern society, we've gotten so far away from the idea of being able to call people out when they behave inappropriately. We call it, shame culture or bullying, when sometimes kids have to regulate each other that way, right? Like they have to be able to be willing to talk to each other about what is and isn't appropriate and kind of draw those lines of distinctions for themselves because that's part of growing up to become a healthy adult. And so I kind of jokingly say, like, we need more shaming because people are acting out of line in all kinds of ways these days. And it can be a useful social tool to have people behave in a manner that is respectful and appropriate for other people. And being in school and having that exposure to other kids is kind of how a lot of people learn what is and isn't crossing the line.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It doesn't even have to be shaming. It could just be, we're social. We recognize that when someone wears cat ears and a tail to school, everything's probably not all right at home. Then maybe we need to have a conversation with this kid. It's a signal, if not a cry for help, to be that extremely different. And for some of them, maybe it is just a fashion choice. The ears are cute, fine. But for those that it's clearly antisocial, and you can tell by the behaviors like you described, the licking, that's a lot. I think, yes, it's good that we're social enough that when we see that, we're like, something's not right here, and kids aren't good at expressing their emotions. They might say, why are you being weird? Stop being weird. But the point is that this is a person who needs attention, and that should be on the school administrators and the guidance counselors to talk with the kid and figure out what might be behind the cat persona, complex trauma perhaps.
It does seem too like kids can often spot these types of behaviors more than adults can because adults kind of convince themselves or manipulate themselves into believing that all kinds of things are okay because they've sort of been inculcated with this idea that we have to be inclusive and open to all different kinds of behaviors. And kids just have that natural instinct of like, oh, actually, no, that's not normal. That's not okay. And in the video of the kids walking out from the school, they call out the furries in their class and they say, actually, we think that these kids are just doing it for attention. We don't think they actually believe they're animals. We don't think that they just like to dress that way. We think they're doing it for attention. And it's amazing that they were able to say that so openly, whereas the principal and the school resource officer are sort of equivocating about trying to be careful about protecting the furries' feelings. It's such an interesting dichotomy of the way that our brains develop as we get older and the way that we kind of convince ourselves to accept things that kids will immediately call out as perhaps unacceptable. We'll be back, more Rising, after this.